Good morning. Thank you for inviting us to come today and share about what's happening with the Winnebago Waterways Program. I'm Jessica Schultz. I'm the director at the Fox Wolf Watershed Alliance, and I'm going to let Corinne introduce herself in just a moment. Before we jump into the Winnebago Waterways Program, I just wanted to introduce you to the Fox Wolf Watershed Alliance. We've been able to talk with some of you on different committees at the county level, but haven't met all of you yet. So I wanted to let you know who we are as an organization. The Fox Wolf Watershed Alliance is a local nonprofit that's working to protect and restore the water resources of the Fox Wolf River Basin. And what does that mean? The Fox Wolf Basin is the largest watershed in the state. So it starts way up in Crandon, Wisconsin. That follows the Wolf River down, which empties into the Winnebago system, right? But then we also have the Upper Fox River that's down in the Green Lake area, and that flows north into the Winnebago system, right? Then all the water from Lake Winnebago flows northeast up the Lower Fox River and empties into the Bay of Green Bay. This is a huge watershed that covers more than 6,000 square miles. So this is what we're working as an organization to protect and restore. A huge undertaking, right? It takes a lot of partnerships. Part of what we do a lot of outreach and education. We currently have a staff of 7. We work through contracted work like the Winnebago system, or the Winnebago project that Corinne's going to talk about with all of you. But then we also work with contracts from wastewater treatment plants, some unlikely partners, right? There's a lot, and urban stormwater communities. There's a lot of entities that are working towards advancing our mission. So we work with those people to make the best use of dollars in the region to have the largest impact on water quality. We do a lot of outreach and education. The newest endeavor that we are working on is the Lower Fox River. We're working in agriculture through grants through the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. We've been able to bring in just under $6 million in the last 3 years into the Lower Fox River watershed. And Calumet County has benefited from that through a subcontract to do some work in the Plum and Conkapot Creek watersheds. So another thing I just wanted to make you aware of before Corinne talks about the Winnebago program. For the Fox Wolf Watershed Alliance, we've tried to because the watershed is so large, we've broken it up kind of into 3 compartments. One would be the Lower Fox from the Lake Winnebago to the Bay of Green Bay. And then we have the Winnebago system, which you're going to hear about today. Then we're also doing work in the Upper Fox River. So everything that's happening in the Wolf River, everything that happens in the Wolf River ultimately impacts what you guys are dealing with in the Lake Winnebago system. So we are doing work in the Wolf River system with an organization called WAMSCO, the Waterways Association of Shawano and Menominee Counties. And a lot of what's happening in the Winnebago system, we're bringing up into that part of the watershed. So hopefully you'll see a positive impact from the work that we're doing upstream. Today we're going to focus on the Winnebago system, and I'm going to pass it over to Corinne.
Thank you. So my name is Corinne Deering. I'm the Winnebago Waterways Program Coordinator with Fox Wolf Watershed Alliance, and I'm going to talk about the Winnebago Waterways Program. Within the Winnebago Waterways Program, we kind of have 3 main focus areas. One is community outreach and education, aquatic invasive species prevention, and then what I'm going to really focus on today is lake management planning, and that's what the handout that we provided you all with today refers to. So the goal of the Lake Management Planning Project is to coordinate with stakeholders and project partners to develop a framework for cooperation. So that's really what the Lake Management Plan is. It's going to serve as a framework for cooperation. And so we want to do that throughout the region to improve upon existing programs and efforts that aim to restore and protect the health of the Winnebago Lakes. And so when I refer to the Winnebago Lakes, I'm sure you all are familiar with that term, but just in case, that includes Lakes Poygan, Winneconne, Butamore, and Winnebago. So many of you might have heard in the past about some of these other projects that have taken place, and so we kind of wanted to provide a timeline to show where we've come from and where we're going. So the Wayne and Winnebago project is what we're calling phase 1. And that's where we had some initial stakeholder engagement, where members of the public were asked to report in on what they thought the issues were with the Winnebago lakes. And the big things that came from that effort were algae blooms, polluted runoff, and aquatic invasive species. And given the size of the lakes and the overlapping jurisdictions, the Phase 1 led to Phase 2 so that we could explore ideas for cooperative management, because we really needed a way to be able to collaborate among all the various interested parties. So Phase 2 led to Phase 3 and 4, and that's why we're now in lake management planning. But lake management planning isn't our end goal. That's just kind of a means to get to implementation. And implementation is really where a lot of the action is going to take place. And that's where we're going to get to see the projects on the ground to get those improvements to tackle things like invasive species, polluted runoff, and algae blooms. So why do we need a lake management plan? So as I mentioned, the size of the lakes can make management difficult. We have multiple jurisdictions, a very large geography, and lots of competing interests. The lakes are degraded. We have the harmful algal blooms, polluted runoff, and invasive species. And on the positive side, a lake management plan will open up funding opportunities for that implementation phase, so we can see that work happen on the ground. And I want to remind people that despite some of these negatives, the lakes are vital to our local economies, and they serve as a public drinking water source for about 250,000 people. And they also are important to long-held family traditions. And this number here, the $234 million, that comes from just recreational angling to the 5-county region. And that's a 2006 number from UW Extension. So I think, don't hold me to this, but if you account for inflation, that number would be closer to $280 million every year. So I guess before I continue, I'll let you, I just want to say that I'm not going to dive into too much detail. A lot of that's provided in your handout, but I'm going to give an overview of some of the things that we've done in 2017, and then provide a little bit of a hint as to what's coming for 2018. So this is a map of the project area. This is also in your handout. The main focus for the lake management plan is going to be on in-lake concerns, but we wanted to make sure to include the sub-watersheds. That's the colored areas around the lakes in the map. And the reason for that is a lot of what happens on the landscape can impact the water quality in the lakes. And so we're going to have a team that focuses on those sub-watersheds to help see some of those improvements on the landscape. This is what we consider the project framework. And there's a lot of arrows, and it can get a little bit confusing, and so there's a bit of detail in your handout about how this all works. But basically, the take-home message is we set this framework up in this way so that we can provide ample opportunities for stakeholders to engage in multiple stages throughout the process. So this lake management plan, it's not a county plan, it's not a DNR plan, it's a stakeholder plan. And that's really important because we want to make sure that we get the input and buy-in from people throughout the region so that this plan doesn't just sit on a shelf, that this plan actually gets used, and that we see those improvements on the landscape or in the lakes. Another great thing I'd like to highlight is through that framework, we've been able to partner with a lot of organizations, and this list is just going to continue to grow. Right now, we're at about just over 30 organizations that are actively working on the project, in addition to many individuals that are participating. So here are some project highlights from 2017. We kicked off lake management planning earlier this year. We defined the project area, so referring to that map that I showed you. We developed that project framework. We formed several partnerships, and we're continuing to put a lot of effort into building more. And we formed 4 of our technical teams. So our technical teams are groups of experts for each of the lake management planning topics. And so those teams are aquatic invasive species and plant management, habitat, fish and wildlife, recreational lake use, access, and navigation, and water quality. And for each of these teams, they've been doing some really great work. The Habitat Fish and Wildlife team is working to develop a strategy to identify potential habitat sites throughout the lakes, and then working to develop a scoring system for prioritizing those habitat projects. It might sound simple, but it's actually a pretty large undertaking, and so we're excited to get that process going. The Aquatic Invasive Species and Plant Management team, they developed a sampling strategy to look at aquatic vegetation in all 4 lakes. A project or a sampling plan of that caliber has not been conducted in the lakes before, so it's pretty exciting. It's going to give us some really good baseline data for not only aquatic plants but also for water quality and for habitat. And we're hoping, pending some grant funding, that'll take place in 2018. The Aquatic Invasive Species and Plant Management team is now transitioning to begin working on the development of an AIS strategic plan for the Winnebago system. The Recreational Lake Use, Access, and Navigation team completed a series of online interactive discussions to look at what are some of the issues with lake access, how can we improve access, and how can we improve the navigation aids in the system. They're now transitioning to begin looking at the feasibility of developing a system-wide comprehensive navigation aid strategy. And then the water quality team is collaborating with the DNR to look at how can we use aquatic plants in the system to improve water quality. Some other quick highlights, and I also want to say these are just highlights. There's been a whole bunch of other work that's been done, but to save you from all the boring details, I thought I'd just give you some of the more interesting stuff. We held 6 public events in 2017. We had the Winnebago Waterways celebration. Hopefully some of you heard about that this last April. We also held 3 public meetings to introduce lake management planning to the community. And then we held 2 public information sessions on water level management. We discovered that there's sometimes misunderstanding in the community about different aspects of how a lake functions or the management that takes place around a lake. And so we thought that those public sessions would be a good way to educate people on how water levels are actually managed. And we hope to repeat that process in 2018 with some other topics as well. And then we also have some online communication. So this is another level to that public outreach and engagement. So people that aren't directly involved with the project, they want to stay informed and up to date on how it's progressing. So we have a project website that gets updated periodically. I invite you all to please visit that and let me know what you think. And then we have an e-newsletter that comes out every month with monthly updates on how things are progressing. We currently have 910 subscribers and hoping to continue to grow that to reach more of the region. And then we're on Facebook and Twitter. So if you're on social media, please like our page. So some of the plans for 2018 for lake management planning, we're going to continue to move our existing technical teams forward. We'll form our additional technical teams, so watershed management, shoreline practices, and our outreach and education teams. We'll also be forming focus groups. So the focus groups are members of the public, so active stakeholders that are going to help the technical teams kind of refine their recommendations for the plan before the plan goes to the broader public for comment. We'll conduct those aquatic vegetation surveys I mentioned earlier and begin drafting substantial portions of the lake management plan, and then continue our public outreach and engagement.
we just wanted to wrap up and let you know where the project funding is coming from. And we want to thank you for your support. The counties, Winnebago, Calumet, and Fond du Lac are providing about half of the financial resources to advance the plan. DNR is contributing approximately the other half of funds. And then there's a lot of in-kind contributions of time and other resources by the partners that Corinne mentioned, the over 30 partners that we have. And finally, just wanted to thank you. As you're well aware, the Intergovernmental Cooperation Agreement between Calumet, Fond du Lac, and Winnebago counties was signed this past fall. I know what it took for you guys to pass that through at county board level, and we can't tell you enough how much that's appreciated. To have 3 counties say together that this system is important to them enough to make it a priority is huge for those that are working to advance and protect, or to advance Fox Wolf's mission of protecting and restoring these water resources. It meant a lot to the NGO, the nonprofit community, all the sportsmen's clubs out there. So we just want to thank you for acknowledging the importance of the system and willing to work together. Also wanted to thank you as part of that, the first action of the Winnebago Waterways Committee. They did sign the contract with the Fox Wolf Watershed Alliance to continue to advance lake management planning. So we really appreciate your support and are excited about this project. And the way that we work is, while we're excited about planning, we're way more excited about implementation. So we're really looking forward to when this plan is done, that we can start leveraging grant dollars and other organizations' dollars to do the implementation, because that's what we really all want to see happen. So thank you for your support.
I think we're just fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, excuse me, Supervisor Weinberger, I did not see your name. Thank you.
I believe this question is for Jessica.
Yes. I thought I got off
I'm
easy
sorry,
when there was no
the other
questions.
lady.
Corinne, okay.
Okay. You mentioned that you have a team that works in the colored shaded areas of that diagram. And is that kind of monitoring pesticides and fertilizers that possibly go into Lake Winnebago, or isn't that part of the equation?
I'm actually going to pass that to Jessica because she'll be leading the watershed management team.
Okay.
For the watershed management team, looking at all different things that go into Lake Winnebago, that team has not formed yet. My best answer for you right now, I believe we're probably the 2 top priorities that we're going to look at are going to be sediments and nutrients like phosphorus that are running off the landscape. I want to make sure that you realize, though, we're not just talking about the agricultural landscape. When it comes to watershed management, there's often a lot of finger pointing. We all own a piece of that pie, whether it's my urban backyard and what I do to that, or the industrial and wastewater treatment plants, or the farmers. So we all have a piece of that, and that's what we'll be tackling in that watershed team.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. We've talked about, or you've talked about, receiving around $240 to $280 million worth of impact in the Lake Winnebago area over a season. Is that correct? My question is, what does it cost us, an estimate, do you think, to have that amount of money come in? I know there's all kinds of grant money out there, there's all kinds, but is there any number put together to about what that might be?
That's a really good question, and I can't say the number of the dollars that come in from the economic study that was done by Extension, and I don't know if anyone studied the cost associated with that revenue.
That'd be nice to have.
We'll look into that, though. If we can find a number, we'll definitely share it, but I don't know if it's out there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Jessica, I think Kevin brought this up, but I wanted to just comment that it's usually one of the most obvious impacts that we see is the algal bloom that comes usually in August and smells bad, looks bad, dangerous for animals and swimmers. But when can we likely expect the water management team to develop the actual recommendations on actions that can be undertaken to implement this plan? Do you have a time frame for when those are likely to appear, and where will we be able to find them? The website or someplace else?
So as the teams get pulled together in advance, Corinne is keeping the website updated with the documents related to each individual team. The watershed management team will begin meeting in March. Because a lot is known about watershed management, and there is a lot of work being done elsewhere in the state about recommendations that could be incorporated into a lake management plan, I don't anticipate that team taking too long. When I say too long, I'd like to see a draft of the recommendations done by 2018 for that team. So those, as soon as the draft is done, we'll be working with the focus groups and doing public comment on that. So that's our goal for that team, is to have the recommendations done for 2018. We'll also be working really closely with DNR for that team. DNR is doing a study called a TMDL, a total maximum daily load, which accounts for the sediment and nutrients that's running off the landscape and identifies the sources of that pollution on a sub-watershed basis. So we're going to have some good science behind the recommendations that come out from the management team.
Thank you. I guess we're really interested in getting at the implementation as soon as you've got those. And I want to say that we really appreciate the work that your organization is doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I was very timely. I was at a town board meeting in my district just a couple weeks ago, and they were asking me, what is Winnebago Waterways going to do for us? They do have a question that they have, just as you said, sediment and nutrient runoff is actually, in this case, it's they're having issues with runoff from a legally closed materials mine. And so it's very steep or whatever. And they were wondering, will there be grant opportunities? I know we do get technical support from the county to help with that question, but that was their question. Is there granting work? How can Winnebago Waterways help their situation?
I don't know specifically about the mine or remediation type of grants. My first instinct is to say yes, because it's one of the goals of the lake management plan, is that once we have that plan in place, sorry, I'm going to go down here. Once we have that plan in place, that's going to open up a lot of funding opportunities. And that's kind of one of the reasons that we're tackling this large project.
Wrap up. So also part of the lake management plan will identify potential funding sources for the issues that are identified as needed to be fixed in the plan. So if we know that that's an issue, we'll help to see what are our options available, because we can't speak to what the mining grants are available right now. But if that's an issue that needs to be addressed in order to meet our water quality goals, we'll take a look at what are the funding opportunities that could possibly be brought into the table.
And currently right now, this is planning, and so there really isn't granting for implementation till possibly next year. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I hope that you'll work with the legislators that support what we're doing and stay away from those guys that are knocking down what we already have in place.
Thank you. We appreciate that comment. There's a lot of support right now throughout the state, especially for this region in the Fox Wolf Basin. So we are part of the Save the Bay initiative that Congressman Gallagher has started in the region, and we're trying to bring more people into the support side. And I think there's a lot to be said about educating people on what the mission actually is for this lake management plan. There's a lot of misconceptions out there, so it's just taking the time to build those trusted partnerships.
Thank you. Are you sure you can really clean this up? Are there other places that you have seen where they've cleaned up the waterways, or are you just going on a whim that you can do it? Is there other places that have done this?
There's a lot of works in progress. Can we guarantee that once this plan is done and we implement everything that's in the plan, that we're going to have the waters that we want or that we expect to have? I can't guarantee that. I believe that we can guarantee improvement. We've seen some of the demonstration farms in the lower Fox River have seen improvements in the stream right by them. Is it going to take longer to see an improvement in the Fox River and in the Bay of Green Bay because of the improvements in the stream? Yes. So I think all we can do is start locally and see improvements locally and expect that when we see improvements locally, we're going to see them in the larger water body.
Just don't clean up Winnebago too much, because then we have no sturgeons anymore.
We got to take everything into account, and that's
Sure.
what's really neat about the technical teams, is we have people with diverse backgrounds and diverse desires of why they're helping. So people that are representing the sturgeons are on the teams, and they know what the sturgeon need. So it's great, the number of people involved.
All right, Supervisor Gens, and I think this will probably be our last question because we're behind on our public hearing.
Okay. I'll be real quick. I just want to make a comment here that as we're going along with this planning process, more and more people are getting involved. And that's a strength of this whole effort. It's you and I and everyone that's connected. We're talking about 20% of all the watershed areas in the state of Wisconsin. So this is truly a large project. If you or anyone else would like to become involved, we would welcome that. Just contact Corin and get involved. I'm amazed at the breadth of involvement that is occurring already. And a tribute to all the people who have done that. So get involved.
Thank you, Supervisor Gens. Supervisor Shea, one last question.
Yeah, thank you very much for your discussion. All I want to say is I wish the state and the federal government would take your leadership and use it in their legislation. I find it reassuring that we're going to try to, instead of move things backwards, we're going to move forward. And I just wish that they would get off their duffs and do things right. That they would come on board and grant the money that you need and take the leadership from you versus from the top down. Thank you.
Thank you, girls. We really appreciate your help in coming here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck. All right, we're going to move down to item number 9, a public hearing on the Calumet County Agreement and Plan for the Public Library Service.